Okay.
I'll toss it to Dave, and then we'll wrap our way through. Dave, who do you have as the 10th greatest player in NBA history?
So, without further ado, the 10th greatest player of all time on my list is also the greatest non American born basketball player of all time. He's the only player to win, or he's one of, I'm sorry, three players to ever win Most Valuable Player award in the regular season, as well as Defensive Player of the Year award in the exact same season, and that's Hakeem Olajuwon.
Nice.
I can't disagree with that too much. Who do you have at 10?
So I actually have Wilt Chamberlain. This was a really hard one for me for number 10. I had to exclude a player that's I was hard for me to do. Wilt has two championships. He's the all-time rebounding leader by 9,000 boards. So essentially, no one is going to break that record. So that's insane. Also, four-time MVP. Honestly, two championships in that time period, as dominant as he was, is kind of disappointing. But I'm sure he dealt with a lot of racial issues during that time. That was during civil rights and things like that. So I'm sure he dealt with a lot of stuff like that.
All right, so at the 10 spot, I have Steph Curry coming in as the greatest shooter of all time, one of the greatest offensive players of all time. I have him as the 10th greatest player. I just had him edging out Wilt on my top 10. I think now we can kind of just discuss our who we have at 10. I think for me, Wilt, the area he played in, I just pushed him down a little bit for me. And the competition he had, so it pushed him down to, I had him just outside at 11. I had Curry at 10.
I had Curry at 11. So that was the tough decision for me. Was that decision, but I went with Wilt at 10.
So my justification for not putting Wilt on there, Hakeem did make it. There's very few centers who make my list. I just kind of view it as Wilt was like 7 foot tall. He was playing in an era where the average competitor was nowhere near as athletic as they are today, or they were in like the 90s or the 80s for that matter. So I feel like if you win the genetic lottery, you have to do something very undeniable. Granted, he was a scoring machine. He had a season where he averaged like 40 points or 50 points a game, and they changed a lot of rules because of him. So I do give him a lot of credit. He is a true pioneer in basketball. But to say, is he a top 10 player of all time? It's just really hard for me to put anyone 7 foot tall in there who was just not undeniable. And of course he is undeniable, but we have these star asterisks, just like who did he play? Who's the best player that he played against while he was the number one guy in the league? I'd be remiss if I knew who the answer was.
Bill Russell.
Well, there you go. That's a good one.
All right, and then as we're going through this, we'll move to number 9. But as we're going through this, I would say try not to tip picks. So so only talk about players that you've had on your list already, or maybe players that didn't make the list. So that way we kind of just leave a mystery to it.
True.
So then, not saying that anybody did that going forward. And so then I'll wrap around. I'll start with number 9. So who I have at the 9 spot is Tim Duncan. I think he's the greatest power forward of all time. Champion. I think the knocks against him maybe that he kept the continuity. He had maybe the greatest head coach of all time in NBA history. Had that continuity of players, but I think he paved the way for Jokic, kind of that non-vocal leader, just that guy who just wanted to win. And I think that he's just a winner. And in his prime, an elite defensive player, a really good offensive player as well. I have Tim Duncan coming in.
My 9 spot, I also have Tim Duncan. He has 5 chips, 2 MVPs, 15 All-NBA selections. He was very versatile. He won his first championship with David Robinson, and then he played a lot of his career with Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, and then Kawhi. And I know he had Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili for majority of his career, but those aren't like crazy elite players like some of these other players that we're going to discuss in the future. So I'm not saying he did a lot with a little, but he did a lot, and he did have good help. But
Yeah,
He
and
was
you
he
can
was
use the
great.
same arguments against Steph Curry as well, or Tim Duncan.
Yeah, yeah,
All of his successes with elite teams.
yeah.
All right, who do you have at 9, Dave?
So at number 9 for me, it just goes without saying he's referred to as the human triple double, and I have Oscar Robertson. He was a 6'5" point guard who, like, everyone has humored like the LeBron can go get a triple double if he wants it. Like, some players are athletic enough to do it if they want it. He did it naturally. He was averaging like 27 points a game in a season where he honestly should have won MVP. He averaged a triple double. It was like 27, 13, and 10. His numbers were nuts. And if I'm not mistaken, he ironically lost the MVP that year to, if I'm not mistaken, I have to repeat that. I think it was Hakeem. So he didn't lose to like a chump per se, but I think he's the third best point guard of all time. And the fact that his nickname is the human triple double, that like you undeniably are one of the most versatile players athletically, I would say, at a point guard position to ever play basketball.
Yeah, I didn't have Oscar Robertson on my list. I just
Oh.
the accolades, I think, outside of just personal accolades, are lacking when it comes to him. Yeah, you can definitely argue he's the third best point guard of all time. I just think, again, for him, it's that era. It's an era that we didn't watch that much, and also the competition too. So
Yeah.
and then just on top of that, yeah, the team accolades and just that's lacking outside of it, other than just personal
I
accolades.
think he only had one championship, which isn't terrible, but
Yeah. All right, so then Dave wraps back around to you for the 8th spot.
So for the 8th spot, I have Shaquille O'Neal. I kind of humored this a little bit earlier. He's the most dominant center / player to ever play the game, in my opinion. I think his paint presence is unparalleled ever. They had to reinforce the rims because of how many times in his rookie years that he was just yanking them down, which isn't an all-time accolade. It's just something that I think reflects his dominance. He's got 4 rings. The Shaq and Kobe tandem was nuts. So like Shaq won Finals MVP like I think 3 or 4 times with that duo. He's third time in field goal or third all-time field goal percentage. And then he even had seen a little bit of success in that year with Dwayne Wade, so that showed he wasn't exclusively bound to winning with LA. I don't think much more has to be said. Just most dominant player ever.
nice. So for my number 8, I also have Shaquille O'Neal. So 4-time NBA champion, 14-time All NBA, 3-time All Defense, and then he won an MVP as well to boot. So he was just a great player to watch. In 2006, when he played with Miami, I'm a huge Dwayne Wade fan. And so him and Shaquille O'Neal was like watching a diet Kobe Bryant and Dwayne Wade, and it was just really, really fun to watch. So yeah, Shaq was very, very good for a pretty long time, even in Orlando. So yeah, Shaq's at my number 8.
So at number 8, I have Shaq's teammate. I have Kobe. I have Kobe Bryant. I have him coming at 8. I think Kobe, the five championships. I think a lot of people kind of try and vault him into the top 5. What holds him out of the top 5 for me is having the Shaq, the most of the success with Shaq, and then he did have a lot of success with Powell as well. The other 2 championships that he won. But I think he is as we're people try and compare LeBron James to Michael Jordan. Kobe Bryant's the closest thing we've seen to Michael Jordan since Michael Jordan, and Kobe idolized Michael Jordan. They were close. He asked for help and pointers and advice from Jordan. There's so many stories of that, and I think that truly their games are very similar. And I have Kobe. All right, so then at 7, I do have Shaq. We kind of discussed that. Most dominant center of all time, physically dominant. He's my number 2 center of all time. I think the success he had at multiple stops and winning multiple championships, not just with the Lakers, but we forget just the type of. I think too many times we forget just how physically dominant Shaq was. Kind of before, most people, especially in our generation, have the idea of him when he was getting older and getting fatter. And then now, he's just some big lumbering guy on TV. But if you see him in the Magic years, he was so
Oh my
slim
goodness.
and just ripped. Yeah, I have Shaq at 7.
I just want to like condone that pick by mentioning that Shaq and Penny in the second round beat the Bulls, the Jordan Bulls, the year before the 72-10 season happened. So Shaq and Penny had success. That was like something I just wanted to mention. I forgot to mention earlier.
Yeah. And Shaq was dominant when there was really big centers, and you had a really big center and a really big power forward. In today's NBA, you don't really see that. But so for my number 7 pick, I have Kobe. So 5 chips. Surprisingly, only 1 MVP. That's like kind of not disappointing because that sounds like messed up to say, but he was just such a dominant player. To only have 1 MVP was kind of shocking to me. I thought he had like at least 2. But was also pretty shocking was he's 9 all defensive first team selections. That's insane. Kobe was a good defensive player, but I don't have him as like a top 10 defensive player. So for him to have 9 all defensive first teams, that was very, very shocking for me to hear about that.
So for my next pick is one that was already mentioned. You guys were unanimous on this one. It's the big fundamental, Mr. Tim Duncan himself. We've already kind of gone over it. 5 rings. Whether it was a product of the system he was in or not, the Spurs were virtually always in the playoffs. Best power forward ever. Tim Duncan can't not be in my top 10. I just had him edging out Shaq because I think Tim Duncan was a little bit more IQ-based basketball as to where Shaq, my previous pick, was a little bit more like physical-based basketball.